Today we're going to have a quick look at some of the basics of unit testing your controllers. I've set up a couple of controllers as examples here. So this one just uses the provides config function to give back JSON straight away. So what we're going to do is hit this index with a GET request and it should return JSON straight back with this render with call. And down here I've got another function which redirects away, which we're going to have a go with as well. I've created a couple of test controllers and they're just in requests. It's a tests requests and they're sort of in that. So the first step is to set up some parameters. So here I've got a param struct with the controller name that I want to test and any additional arguments that I want to make the default. So for instance, in this case, I want to put the format equals JSON to make sure I get JSON back. And here's my test function. So I've set the action of the controller that I want to test, and then I'm using this process request helper. So this is exclusive to the test suite, and what it will do is it'll run the request and then return a whole bunch of data about that request in a struct, and we can then test against the various values it returns. The best part about it is if your request does something like returns JSON, it'll set the header type back to HTML so it doesn't actually break the test suite and sort of force the test suite itself to come back in JSON. So you'll notice I've got a debug call here, so let's just run that and have a look and see what it gives back. So here's the result of my process request call. I've got the body being returned here, any emails, so you'll get an array of any emails which were attempted to have be sent, any files served, anything in the flash, whether the request redirected, the HTTP status code, and the MIME type. So now we can just quite simply write some assert calls. So we're going to check that this status of the request was 200. We're going to test that the MIME type returned was application JSON, and we're going to test the actual body that it's JSON. So let's give that a go, and we'll take off the debug call, and that passes. So that's great. So that's all working. So the other thing which I might want to do is test if one of my functions is appropriately redirecting. So down here, another call. So if I again debug this request and just so we can just see what's coming back, and you can now see in my flash I've got a error struct with a message. I've got a value in the redirect struct key now, and I've got a status of 302. So those are the things I would probably want to test against, and we can do that pretty easily. So 302, and it's going back to the site root, and that the error key exists in the flash and the error message says the right thing. So if we run that, we're all good. We'll take off that debug call as well. So the other thing which has been put into Wheels 2.1 is the ability to test more specifically your controller filters. So if we have a look at this controller on the left here, I've just got one filter called increment number, and all that is doing is incrementing this counter, and I'm storing it in the request scope just because it's easier for demonstration purposes. I'm also calling the filter within the main index call as well. So if this all works, we should get a filter called beforehand, so that should set it to 1. We should then get it called in the index, so that will set it to 2, and then the after filter should kick in, which should set it to 3. So the testing for that, again, I've set up my param struct with my controller name and my action, and we can see the first one here. All I'm doing is passing my params into the process request, and let's have a look at the request value and just check that that will equal 3. And that passes, and there's our debugged request value. So that equals 3. So that implies that it's hitting all the right places. So you might want to also test whether the before you might want to test whether the after functions are kicking in or just the before functions, or you might also want to test a controller action without functions, without filters. So an example of where you'd want to do that is perhaps if it was behind some sort of more complicated authentication, which in itself was a whole separate system which you had different unit tests for. You could just turn off the filtering and test the actual action without having to worry about how those filters interact with the action. So to prove that this works, I've got a couple more tests here. So this one in our process request helper is using the include filters argument, and it's passing in before. So basically I'm just saying only trigger the before filters. And in this one, I'm saying only trigger the after filters. And in this last one, I'm saying don't do the filters at all. And because we're setting the increment in the index action as well, there's always going to be a value of 1. So even if we don't do any filters, it should be 1. So let's give that a go. And those all pass. So the default should be 3. That's good. And then when we've got no filters, it's down to 1. Should be noted that the filter argument is new to CFWheels 2.1. So you might have to wait a few days to get that.